The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.
Hello, this is Morgan Halgren. For 16 seasons, Living in Iowa told the tale of what it means to be uniquely Iowan. Tonight, we honor that spirit by bringing you another glimpse into our rich heritage with a few stories from our archives. In this episode of The Best of Living in Iowa, we'll travel the countryside in search of a majestic symbol that ties us to the past, Iowa's barns. If you take a closer look, you'll see how it's more than just timber that's helping keep these mighty titans of the past standing tall. When someone mentions rural Iowa, what images come to mind? Rolling fields covered with tidy rows of corn and beans? Cows and horses grazing the hillsides? Or maybe perfect family farms framed by big old barns?
Can you imagine Iowa without barns, without corn cribs, without silos?
In the past few decades, the countryside has changed, especially the farmsteads. Those icons of rural life, the barns, have begun to disappear, not by the hundreds, but by the thousands.
I feel bad when I see that because I go by a place and I just say, I wonder what stories could have been told and that poor old barn is falling down.
Well, it's sad. Our small farmers are going by the wayside, and so are the barns.
We're just going to look like an industrial park, like much of the U.S. is starting to look. When you go across a lot of states now, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, you see no barns. And you notice it. You just sort of feel like something's missing. And if we can save these, it's going to be special.
This is the story not of the collapse, but of the renewal of Iowa's barns. We're setting out to savor some success stories and to find out why hundreds of people are joining forces and finances for one cause: saving Iowa's barns.
The property remained in the family till 1972.
While many national and regional organizations are concerned with saving Iowa's barns, our story will focus on one of these groups, the Iowa Barn Foundation. It's a nonprofit organization that raises money to give matching grants to farm families who wish to fix up their barns. In exchange for the grant, the owners must sign an easement so future owners will keep the barns in good repair. According to Foundation President Jackie Schmiel, the idea of saving barns has a far-reaching appeal.
We're getting people from all over, even as far as the Virgin Islands and London. We have a member.
How you doing?
Hi. I would like to think of it as grassroots, just good people who really care about Iowa and about this heritage and about saving it.
The Los Angeles Times has called the Iowa Barn Foundation a leader in barn preservation in the U.S., in part because of one of their outreach activities. It is the Iowa Barn Tour, a weekend-long open house of renovated barns. The first annual tour, held in September of 2001, drew several thousand barn enthusiasts from 20 different states to rural Iowa. The tour gave us a chance to admire these historic structures and also to speak with people who have fond memories of farm life. People like Bill Horeen of Nevada, Iowa.
I graduated from school in Cherokee in 1933, and there was no work for a young man then other than just part-time work, and so I worked on farms. My job every morning was to go out and get the cattle, and always they were on the other side of the river, and I had to swim the river on a horse, you know. I'd be wet clear up to above my knees all morning until it finally dried out, you know.
We're going to collect many memories on this tour, and we're also going to meet some rare Iowans, those who have decided to save their old barns. We're going to ask the question, why? Why did you save it? While the answers to this question are as varied as the barns themselves, we did discover a common sentiment, that barns, no matter how magnificent, no matter how humble, are places which hold meaning. The 120-year-old Clausia barn near Hampton, Iowa, holds meaning for owner John Clausia and several generations of his family.
Actually, I grew up with it, and of course, I spent many hours in it. And I don't know, the family has always been interested in keeping up the barn, and I've just carried on that interest, you see.
John's interest in the old farmstead was amplified by his son, John W. Clausia, who lives in Alexandria, Virginia. Even though John Jr. had never lived in Iowa, the place holds fond memories for him.
Well, he used to come to Iowa for the summers, and he worked around the barn with his grandfather and grandmother. He stayed with them, and so he was interested in the barn, and he wants to keep it up, and he's going to inherit the place. So
Henry Wolfe, John's great-uncle, built the barn in 1879. It has an unusual design, with aisles wide enough for a wagon pulled by a team of horses. The basement's thick limestone walls have sheltered both horses and dairy cows.
we milked from 15 to 18 cows. And then of course, you separated that for cream. And of course, that was quite a project because my dad was president of the creamery for a number of years. And so we had to do that carefully.
Milking was such hard work, it motivated John to leave the farm, and he became a teacher and school administrator. But he still owns this place, and he says he was glad more than 300 people showed up to see his barn and take a walk through the past.
I'm an old history buff, and I think it's interesting that's one way you can really feel history.
I think the barn represents the rural family farm way of life. Well, to me, if we didn't see barns as part of the landscape, it would signify that, you know, we're not maintaining our heritage.
Dennis Heflin was born on this farmstead and has always lived here. The barn holds a lifetime of memories for Dennis, but his most vibrant memory from his childhood was one of loss. While the family was away, Dennis's very first 4-H cow tried to give birth and was unsuccessful. Dennis returned to the barn to find the stillborn calf.
That was just devastating to me at the time. So this barn, you know, we've seen life come to it, we've seen death happen in it and just about anything and everything else in between.
Dennis's mother, Thelma, or Toots Heflin, urged Dennis to repair the barn, but it was a decision that took him several years to make.
I think as we get older, we get more of an interest in saving some of this history for future generations. And I think that's what's happened here. And we just all have to age before we realize maybe there's a reason why we should do this.
Once there were several barns in Shelby County which featured this distinctive four-gabled roof line. The 100-year-old Heflin barn is the only one which remains.
Oh, I grew up in and around Iowa, and I think it's just part of Iowa's heritage. I mean, the pioneers built them, and we still farm, we still use them for different things, and the metal and pole buildings of today just don't feel like home.
Neither Kelly nor Roger Berry grew up on this rural woodbine farm, but their sense of heritage prodded them into saving it.
The barn was built in the mid-30s. Most everybody at that time milked a few cows, had a few chickens, raised a few hogs. A lot of their food was homegrown. They had a large garden at that time, and the barn was just a big part of the farm life through all of the 1900s. And that was one reason we wanted to preserve this one.
The Berrys used their barn to house their donkeys. The curious creatures helped the Berrys create new memories, even as the couple chuckles about the old.
My husband used to tell a story about when he was putting up hay as a kid, and one of the gentlemen helping with the putting up the hay was running a pitchfork, and he was quite blind, and he stabbed my husband in the rear end and pulled out the pitchfork and had no idea that had stabbed a little boy there.
Visible from the nearby highway, the Berry Barn is a local landmark. So perhaps it's no surprise that Kelly and Roger have felt their community's support in their decision to restore.
People were always after us, why don't you do something with that barn? And when we started to fix it up, we got so many compliments and people coming up and shaking our hands. Thank you for preserving that barn, don't tear it down. A lot of us argued about what color it should be, and people were just thrilled when we painted it the old barn red. First, we got in contact with the carpenter because we really thought it might be beyond repair. They came in with cables and turnbuckles, raised the roof, pulled the sides in, dug out the old broken up foundation. We poured new foundation. There's new sidewalls, new front. Pulled it all together, and it turned out pretty nice.
The restoration is an ongoing thing, and you never get done. But it's in pretty good shape. It's not sagging, and we had it painted about 5 years ago. And but the work on the foundation and the roof was just this summer.
As the owner of a barn that's 130 years old, Cecil Gillespie sees restoration as just another part of the scenery. His great-grandfather, W.W. George, built the barn in 1874. The Gillespie barn has a long history. It sits atop Old Bluff Road, a trail that was used by many early settlers on their way to Council Bluffs. It's a credit to the family that after all this time, the Gillespie barn not only stands, but is still in use, housing cattle cared for by Cecil's son-in-law.
It's not a money-making thing because it costs a lot of money to renovate a barn, and they don't build them that way now. They're just a different type of a building than we use today. But yeah, it's just the nostalgia, I suppose.
I've always liked going in barns ever since I was a girl because I think you can almost feel the spirit of all the animals that have been in the barn. So I think it's definitely a sanctuary, and I think it also represents the heritage of the entire state.
Just a few years ago, Wendy Elliott and Joe Rood were Midwesterners living in New York City. They decided to return to Iowa when their children were born. The couple yearned to live in the country and start an organic farm, but surprisingly had trouble finding the farm of their dreams.
You'd think in Iowa it'd be easy to find a farm, but a lot of times people carve out the buildings as an acreage and then just sell the bare land to maximize their sale price.
They call their new home Harmony Hill, but the barn was in discord.
The barn was leaning more every day, so we really had to do it immediately. So I felt like a real farm wife because the choice was save the barn or do something on my house, and I chose the barn first.
The couple found 2 different house movers and a team of Amish builders to help straighten the structure. They searched out large antique timbers to replace posts in the basement, and Lee Gelder helped them repair the barn's cedar roof.
I think it's important that people do this. I know my children really don't have any idea what the purpose of a barn is. They just look at it as a big old building that is 90% of them are empty. If somebody doesn't do something, children are not going to know what a barn was even used for in another 20 years, and be lucky to find a barn.
Wendy and Joe plan on using the barn to raise organic lambs, calves, ducks, chickens, and turkeys. They can think of the renovation as an investment in their new business, but still, it wasn't an easy decision financially.
Yeah, it definitely was an act of love, I think. We tried to rationalize it with an analysis of what we would save, but definitely it took money away from other wants that we had, but we're glad we did it.
Don't see barns like you used to. It makes me feel I'm getting old or something. Everything is wearing out.
Dale Johansson is visiting a barn he helped build in 1948, the Bennett family barn near Latimer. It was a replacement for a barn that had been struck by lightning. Gary Bennett, the current owner, didn't grow up here, but he wishes he had.
I've lived on a farm all my life, and I've milked dairy cows for about 30 years. I quit milking about 15 years ago. And all the years that I milked, I never had a barn this nice to milk in. Sort of ironic.
The Bennett barn retains some original details made especially for dairy farmers. Sturdy stanchions for the cows, a water cooler for old-fashioned milk cans, and even a fancy manure lift for cleaning things up. Gary's got some strong memories of growing up on a farm, but you probably wouldn't call them fond memories. Some are as uncomfortable as they are memorable.
Oh, there's a lot of things that I remember. I remember getting hit on the head with a bale of hay when I walked under the hay chute. And I remember getting stuck in the soft yard in the spring and walking out of my boots, and sort of things like that that stick with you.
But even these memories haven't dissuaded him from fixing up this old barn. The barn he wishes he could have had as a young man.
I like it when people say, boy, your place looks nice. You know, you come down the gravel road and you see it, and when it's all painted and pretty, it's just a beautiful barn.
Shirley and Larry Ellis have lived on this farmstead near Lytton for more than 30 years. Their big red barn is a local landmark, and they felt a strong desire to save it.
We built a new house, we tore down the corn crib, we've added the horse barn, we've added a shop. So this is actually about the only original building on the farm.
Over the past several years, they've redone almost every piece of the barn, from the thick foundation on up. The work has included replacing and moving siding, doors, windows, and the entire roof. While the Ellis farm is a haven for traditional farm animals like roosters and a few head of cattle, the main residents of the barn are Arabian horses.
His name's Like a Rock, and we call him Chevy, AKA Chevy.
Larry says their 80-year-old barn will not only outlive the newer buildings on his land, it will provide safe haven for his prized animals.
This winter, when the animals are in there and you can go to bed at night and know that they're housed nicely, and that gives you peace of mind too. So, yep, I'm pretty proud of it. I'm as proud as the guy that built it, I think.
Family was the reason Charles Anstey decided to renovate his barn near Messina.
I did it kind of to remember of my parents and grandfather.
His grandfather, George J. Anstey, had the barn built in the 1920s.
He built the barn for my folks as a wedding present when they were the following year after they were married. The house and the barn both at the same time.
The Anstey barn is famous for its purebred Herefords. In 1927, every major Hereford show winner in the nation was from this stock, and the family still raises them. During his childhood, Charles remembers spending much of his time in this place.
We had 4-H calves, and we showed 4-H calves all the time. They were in this barn, and I just remember we raised a lot of hogs. If I had $1 for every head that walked up that alleyway, I'd be a rich man.
These days, members of the 5th generation of Ansteys live nearby, spending more time with the farm dogs and cats than with the livestock. Charles is pleased to know that these children will always be able to visit the barn built by their great-great-grandfather. It seems completely natural to see Iowa's barns standing tall, well-painted, brimming with hay and farm animals. It's what we expect them to look like. But the reality is that hundreds of barns are disappearing every year. And that is what people who are trying to save barns want us to know, that we can't take our barns for granted.
The Iowa Barn Foundation estimates that over 1,000 barns a year are lost in Iowa, and they just won't ever come back.
But with the help of hundreds of Iowans and support from organizations such as the Iowa Barn Foundation, at least a few of our barns will be spared the bulldozer and will grace our countryside for years to come.
I think we have tremendous momentum. I mean, we are really thrilled with how things are going. And I hope that eventually Iowa really does become known as the barn state.
The Best of Living in Iowa is funded in part by the Gilchrist Foundation. Founded by Jocelyn Gilchrist, furthering the philanthropic interests of the Gilchrist family in wildlife and conservation, the arts and public broadcasting, and disaster relief.
Funding for this program was provided by Friends, the Iowa Public Television Foundation. Generations of families and friends who feel passionate about the programs they watch on Iowa Public Television.